దూర విద్యా విధానంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూర విద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ బీఏ, బీకామ్, బీఎస్సీ డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
Good afternoon. Today's topic is tetrapod limb development. This topic is for zoology, UG final year students and PG first year students. Related to this topic, we have two subject experts today. First is Professor Damayanti Devi. She is the Dean of Faculty of Sciences, and then we have Dr. Padmini. So I just request these subject experts to start the discussion. First, let us start with Dr. Padmini Devi.
Thank you, Shraddha. As you all know, students, a very good evening, good afternoon to all of you all. As you all know, today's topic, evolution of tetrapod limb development. Now, first we will understand how a lobed fin fish, how they evolved into a tetrapod. Now, evolution is a development of organisms through time. The term evolution means a gradual orderly change from one condition to another. It is also defined as changes in the frequency of gene population. The kind of evolution which includes evolution from atoms and molecules and from simple to complex substances capable of self duplication has been termed as chemical or molecular evolution. The most significant outcome of chemical evolutions are origin of biologically important macromolecules like proteins, DNA, RNA, origin of life and an environment to sustain life on the planet Earth. Thus, the concept of organic evolution holds that all the varied kinds of animals and plants which are now known have developed out of earlier types by completely natural changes during the passage of time. The concept of evolution is based on detailed comparison of structures of living and fossil forms, on the sequences of appearance and extinction of species in that past age. The evolution of tetrapod began about 395 million years ago in the Devonian period, with the earliest tetrapod evolved from the lobe fin fishes, while the modern tetrapod group having appeared by the late Devonian 367.5 million years ago. As you all know, the Devonian period was the age of fishes. In the early Devonian period, 416 to 397 millions, the Sarcopterygians or the lobe fin fishes split into three main lineages. Those are the Rhiphidistiae, Actinistia and Dipnoi. All the Sarcopterygians are viviparous, that is, they give birth to one or two young, highly developed young ones at a time. Now, the Rhiphidistians, whose ancestors probably lived in the oceans near the river mouths or the estuaries, left the ocean world and migrated into the freshwater habits. They in turn split into two major groups, that is the lungfish and the tetrapodomorphs. The Rhiphidistians are a mixed group of lobe fin fishes that form outgroups to the two main living groups, that is the Actinistia and the Dipnoi. The Rhiphidistians also include ancestors of tetrapods. The characters that ally them with the tetrapods are seen in an arrangement of the bones in the skull and in their lobe fins. Many details of the skeleton of the pectoral and the pelvic fins match very closely the bones in the forelimbs and the hind limbs. Now, if you can see the picture, the Devonian rhiphidians and the modern coelacanths, that would be easily understood by all what we really mean by the rhiphidians. These coelacanths are characterized by their 3 lobed tail. The tail is symmetrical with a curved upper and the lower section and a longer projecting rather lobed middle portion. The sarcopterygians fins supported by a The sarcopterygians have fins supported by large fleshy lobes containing bony skeletons. There is only one extant species in the first sarcopterygians order, the Crossopterygi, and that is the famous coelacanths, or if you can see in the picture, the Latimeria chalumnae. The lungfish, the next one, the lungfish greatest diversity was in the Triassic period. Today, there are few than a dozen genera left. The lungfish evolved the first proto-lungs and proto-limbs, developing the ability to live outside a water environment. If you can see the lungfish on the pictures shown, you have the Australian lungfish, the South American lungfish, and the Devonian lungfish, and of course, the African lungfish. Now, if you want to understand the characters of each of these fishes, early lobed fin fishes are bony fishes with fleshy lobed pair which are joined to the body by a single bone. The fins of the lobe finned fishes differ from those of all other fishes in that each is borne on a fleshy lobe-like scaly stalk extending from the body. The scales of the sarcopterygians are true scaloids. The pectoral and the pelvic fins have articulations resembling those of the tetrapod limbs. These fins evolved into the legs of the first tetrapod land vertebrates and amphibians. They also possess 2 dorsal fins with separate bases as opposite to the single dorsal fin of actinopterygians or the ray finned fish. The brain case of sarcopterygians primitively has a hinge line, but this is lost in the tetrapods and lungfish. All sarcopterygians possess teeth covered with true enamel. The fin limbs of the lobed fin of fishes such as the coelacanths show strong similarity to the expected ancestral form of tetrapod limbs. The lobe fin fishes apparently followed 2 different lines of development accordingly and separated into 2 subclasses, the Rhiphidicia and Tetrapodomorpha, and the Actinicia, which are the subclass of mostly fossil lobed fins. There are 6 extinct species in the second sarcopterygian order, or the lungfishes. They are found in freshwater in Australia, South America and Africa, as we have discussed earlier. They have this dual brothers hence dipnoids. The dipnoid, also known as salamander fishes, are a subclass of freshwater fish. Lungfish are best known for retaining characteristics primitive within the body fishes, including the ability to breathe air, the structure primitive within the lobe fin fishes, including the presence of lobes with a well developed internal skeleton. Lungfishes are believed to be the closest living relatives of the tetrapod and share a number of important characteristics with them. Among these characters are tooth enamel, separation of pulmonary blood flow and from blood flow arrangements to the skull bones, and the presence of 4 similarly sized limbs with the same position and structure as the 4 tetrapod limbs. Now, the next major group, the Tetrapodomorph, are a clade of vertebrates consisting of tetrapods and their closest sarcopterygians relatives that are more closely related to living tetrapod than to living lungfish. The Tiktaalik is a monospecific genus of extinct sarcopterygians from the late Devonian period, about 375 million years ago, having many features akin to those of tetrapods. These represents the evolutionary transition from fish to amphibians. It is an example from several lines of ancient sarcopterygian fish developing adaptations to the oxygen poor shallow water habits, environmental conditions which are thought to have led to the evolution of the tetrapod. So, if you can see the pictures over there, the early and the Tiktaalik tetrapods. Unlike many previous more fish-like transition fossils of Tiktaalik have basic wrist bones and simple ray reminiscent of fingers. the homology of the distal elements is uncertain. There have been suggestions that they are homologous digits. Among the characters defining the tetrapodomorphs are modifications to fins, notably a humerus with a convex head articulating with a glenoid fossa. The fin was clearly weight bearing. If you can see the picture, it is a weight bearing being attached to a massive shoulder with expanded scapular and coracoid elements, and attached to the body armor, large muscular scars on the ventral surface of the humerus and highly mobile distal joints. The bones of the forearm shows large muscle facets, suggesting that the fin was both muscular and ability to flex like a wrist joint. These wrist joints features would be helped to anchor the creature to the bottom in a fast moving current. So, if you can see the picture how the limbs would have developed, the fish to tetrapod transition, all 4 species shown are sarcopterygians, that is the Acanthostega, the Ichthyostega are the tetrapods. The Tiktaalik is a transition from a fish apod, that is it is both a fish and a tetrapod. Now, if you see the fins to limbs, the Eusteinopteron, the last one, the lobe fin fish, an early relative of the tetrapod, had a pelvic girdle much smaller than the pectoral one, if you can compare that, suggesting the front wheel drive propulsion. If you see the Tiktaalik rosea, the evidence of all wheel drive, that is the pelvis is comparable in scale to those of early tetrapods. And the Acanthostega, this is the early tetrapod, had a weight bearing pelvic girdle allowing it to shift propulsion from the front to the hind limbs. So, with this basic information of these tetrapods, now we will go to Madam, how she will explain how the development of tetrapods has occurred.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the discussion. For any doubt clearance, you can call on these numbers, that is 040 270 31 431, 270 31 432, 270 31 433. Now, we can continue with the limb development lecture from Professor Damayanti Devi.
Okay, thank you very much, Shraddha. And today we are going to discuss about the very important and very interesting part of our zoology, that is the tetrapod limb. And this is useful for UG third year and MSc first year students. So, I want to continue my topic in a bilingual way, so that it will be useful for both the students of MSc and BSc also. Okay. So, and this is not only useful for our Open University students, tetrapod limb development is really useful for each and everybody, because tetra means 4, podus means foot. That is, in the evolutionary process, and vertebrates are first developed these 4 limbs, that is these 2 limbs, one is a pair of 4 limbs. We can call these, our hands are nothing but these are the pair of 4 limbs, and our foot, I think we can call it as a pair of hind limbs. So, these pairs of 4 limbs and hind limbs are very useful for walking purpose and catching and whatever it may be. I think everybody knows the importance of limbs of 4 limbs and hind limbs. Okay. So, I think now we will discuss how the development has taken place for these limbs right from the childhood or right from the embryo, when the embryo is in the mother's womb. So, how the development has taken place, it is a very interesting topic, and I think you can imagine your hands and your bones of foot while we are discussing, so that it is very clear to your mind and you can get the information perfectly. And here you are seeing this, the first visual I have kept, this is the limb of bird actually, and here I have shown that a few 4-limbed animals. I think this is the frog and this is the bird aves, it comes under aves, and this comes under mammalia, and these two also comes under mammalia. I think I want to show you how the limbs are here developed here. Then next come to the second section. So, by the end of this teleconference, I think by the end of the teleconference session, you should able to understand what exactly we are going to discuss in this. The one is, here you can see, that is the skeletal patterning of the vertebrate limb. How the vertebrate limb, because we are using these limbs daily, but nobody, even the small people, whoever it may be, we do not know what exactly the limb pattern is. And the next important thing is general axis of the vertebrate limb, because if the axis is not proper and the limb, the formation of the limb is completely going waste and it is not of any use to anybody. So, you should be able to understand what is this general axis of this vertebrate limb. And then the third stage we can go for stages involved in tetrapod limb development. And in the course of evolution, no organ will develop immediately as it is. So, in the course of evolution, I think one part will develop first and the other comes for next and next. I think this is a continuation process in the evolution. Okay. So, shall we go for the first part now, that is the skeletal patterning of the limb. Okay. And this is a very interesting, and while I am telling you, just imagine your limb. So, I think the limb has got three parts, and I am showing here, one is the stylopod, the second part is the zygopod, and the third one is the autopod. Okay. And first we can see this here, the stylopod. Stylopod is nothing but the proximal part, and this is the fumen. If you see this fumen heart, and this is the stylopod, and this part we can call it as fumerus, and this is the middle part. Middle part consists of two bones, and one is the radius and the other one is the ulna, and this we call it as a zygopod. And the next part is the autopod, and autopod consists of few bone pieces. One is the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Okay. And this is the hand of all the four limbs, all the vertebrate animals, whether it is a frog, whether it is a apes comes under bird or mammal or whatever it may be. And this is the similar structure of forelimb found in every vertebrates. Okay, then we will see the second one, that is the leg part, also leg, and the leg is also will have the similar pattern. And the first leg is, we can consider this first leg as a femur. That first part is the femur bone, and the second part is the two bones just like radius and ulna of forelimb, and these are the tibia and fibula. And the third part, that last part, is that nothing but comes under autopod, and it consists of few bones. And in the case of forelimbs, we call it as a carpals. Here we call it as tarsals. In the forelimb, we call it as a metacarpals, and we call it as metatarsals. And these phalanges, here we call it as toes. I think you are very clear about these bones which are present in the case of forelimbs and hind limbs, and the bone pattern is the similar pattern we can see right from the vertebrate, that is amphibia to mammalia. And now another important thing is general axis of the vertebrate limb. How the vertebrate limb axis is developed in the vertebrate limb. Repeat, I am telling you that if the stylopod is continuous by the zygopod, and if the zygopod should be continued with the autopod, with the last part autopod, the entire limb go waste. So, naturally here we should see what is the directions or axis of the limbs, where the limb has to be arranged perfectly in order to function perfectly. So, here we can see it is will have three main axes. So, the first axis is proximal to distal, the second axis is anterior to posterior, the third axis is dorsal to ventral. So, I think I am repeatedly telling we will have three axes operating this limb, and this we can call it, we also can call it as it is a three-dimensional coordinate system. Okay. We can call it as three-dimensional coordinate system. Now, we will see what all how this three-dimensional coordinate system is formed. So, come to the proximal side, and this proximal side is nothing but the fumerus of our first bone of the hand, or it can be, if it is a hind limb, it is the femur. Okay. The fumerus or femur, it starts from the fumerus or femur, and distal part is nothing but the last part of our digits, that is the fingers. So, the humerus will start from here, that the proximal side is starts from here and slowly it comes to the distal part, and this distal part is nothing but our fingers. Like that we can compare this with the foot also. The foot, what is the first bone? I think the first bone which is attached to the hip region is the femur, and come to this entire length of the foot, and the last toes comes to the distal side. So, I think our entire structure, that is the forelimb and hind limb, is mostly focusing on proximal to distal side. Okay? And another important thing is anterior to posterior. The limb can have the limb should have the axis of anterior and posterior. And you may wonder, and what will everything is come to the proximal to dorsal side, and you may wonder what will be for the anterior to posterior. The anterior to posterior is nothing but, if you keep the hand like this, if you keep your hand like this, the thumb is facing to the anterior side, and your small finger is focusing to the posterior side, and this is the position, that is the anterior and posterior. If this position is not properly set, you are not able to put your finger like this, put your hand like this. Okay. So, I think this is anterior and posterior, and then come to the next third axis, that is the dorsal and ventral. And dorsal and ventral, I think you may wonder where is the dorsal and ventral in this hand. And your palm, have you seen this palm here? Your palm is nothing but it is the dorsal side, sorry, it is the ventral side. Your palm is in the ventral side. And if you can see this, if you turn the palm like this and the knuckles are there, and this forms the dorsal, dorsal side. So, this is the ventral side and this is the dorsal side. And I think now you can imagine, if the positions are not set properly, and if it is this palm cannot go to the dorsal side and dorsal side part cannot come to the ventral side, and if this position is not set properly, and the entire functioning of this hand or foot or whatever it may be, it totally go waste. Okay. So, I think while discussing about the vertebrate limb or vertebrate whatever it may be, forelimb or hind limb, the axis of these limbs are very, very important in the formation in the embryology, in the embryo itself. Then next I will discuss you another important thing. I think you may wonder, these are completely set very perfectly. Do you think automatically it is setting? Never, nothing will come automatically. And there are most important thing is, the few regulatory factors are regulating this 3-dimensional structure. Why I am telling 3-dimensional means, this is one axis and this is another axis, and this is another axis, that is ventral and dorsal. This entire 3-dimensional structure is completely regulated by a particular factors. Now, I will discuss about what are the particular factors. Come to the proximal and dorsal, and I need not explain distal, sorry, I need not explain you once again what is the proximal side and what is the distal side, but this proximal and distal side is completely controlled or regulated by a protein, and that protein is known as fibroblastic growth proteins or fibroblast growth factors, and commonly we call it as FGF. They are known as FGF. And what is FGF? And you may wonder what it is exactly. FGF is nothing but it is a family of proteins of polypeptide chains, and these are secreted by the mesenchymal cells. This is the secretion. Okay, this is nothing but it is a factor that is it is a secretion. Okay, and this is secreted by the mesenchymal cells. So, I think the another important thing in addition to FGF, and the genes are regulating this FGF. The gene expression is regulating the FGF activity. Those genes we call it as Hox genes. I will discuss you later what is the Hox genes are also. Now, I think you should be able to understand the major regulatory factors in the proximal to distal side is nothing but one is a protein, that is the fibroblast growth factor, and the other one is Hox genes, and the other one is Hox genes. Okay. And then next comes the anterior to posterior, and the anterior to posterior is also regulated by a protein that is known as sonic hedgehog protein, and this sonic hedgehog protein commonly we call it as SHH, that is S small h and small h. okay, not capital letters. Why I am telling not capital letters means is S small h or sonic hedgehog is a protein, and this protein is almost it is developed by a gene. This is expression, gene is coding this protein, and the gene which is coding this particular protein is nothing but SHH gene. SHH is nothing but it is a capital letters. You write this gene as in the capital letters and this protein in the small letters. So, SHH protein is always encoded by the gene that is nothing but it is SHH gene, that is anterior and posterior side is totally controlled by the gene activity, okay, expression of the genes. And then come to the next axis, that is dorsal to ventral, and this dorsal to ventral is also controlled by a protein that is known as WNT7A, WNT7A. And this WNT7A, I am telling it is a protein, you have to write in the small letters only. And then this, what is this WNT7A means? Though it is a protein, but in turn it is regulated by a gene. So, that gene we write it as a capital letters, that is nothing but WNT7 gene. Okay. So, always genes will use the capital letters and proteins will use the small letters. So, the gene which is responsible or the is nothing but it is forming the WNT, and this WNT is in turn is a protein and it is controlling the entire dorsoventral areas. So, I think now you should be able to understand in a better manner, that is nothing is forming automatically, nothing is developing automatically from the mother's womb. So, for everything the genes are responsible and the proteins and genes are completely responsible, and that I think everybody should bear in the mind. And here also I will tell you the position, and I have already tell you proximal is nothing but your shoulder and your fingers are the distal side, and your thumb is in the anterior side and your last finger is in the posterior side, and your palm is in the ventral, in the dorsal side, and your knuckles are in the ventral side. Okay. Then what is it exactly? And always we should bear in your mind the interaction of these all these proteins. Okay. So, because morula, mother's womb, first morula will develop all groups of cells, all blastocells, all groups of cells, and these groups of cells has to be differentiated at one stage. What group should form to the forelimb, and what group should give to the hind limb, and which group should go to the some other thing. So, I think this differentiation should be there. Here in the case of limb, the differentiation will comes from this interaction of these all these proteins. Okay, and genes are completely controlled by the proteins, and this interaction of these proteins will determine the differentiation of the genes. Okay, and another important thing is this not only these are not only forming the differentiation of the cells, but it is mutually supporting one another. If it can't mutually supporting one another, I think this three-dimensional system completely collapse. Okay, and these three completely they are completely supporting one another. And next we will continue this. And another important thing is we have already told you, from the mother cell, that is from the ectoderm, germ layers, and this limb has to develop. So, what are the how the limb is developing from the mother's womb or from the germinal layers means we think there are three germinal layers. One is the ectoderm, and the other one is the mesoderm, and the other one is the endoderm. That is, all these morula forms into gastrula, and gastrula almost invagination, epipole, everything will take place, and it will give these three germinal layers. I think time is not sufficient to go for that entire development of that gastrula and blastula. Here directly I am going to the mesoderm, because mesoderm is nothing but the middle layer. And why I am going to the mesoderm means because this limb development is directly originated from the mesoderm. So, that is why we are directly discussing about the mesoderm, and this is the ectoderm, and this is the mesoderm, and this is the endoderm. This part is the endoderm. Okay. So, now come to the mesoderm, and mesoderm is a very important organ which can form so many organ systems in the human body or any vertebrate body. Okay. Here you can observe that small ring like structure. This is nothing but the neural tube which gives to the nervous system, and here you can see the chorda mesoderm which gives to the notochord, and here you can see the paroxial mesoderm, and these paroxial mesoderms are very important here because it forms the somites. And then another important thing is the lateral plate mesoderm. You can find this lateral plate mesoderm in both the lateral sides. Okay. This lateral plate mesoderm is the main particular part from which these limbs are originating. You can see this is one side, you can see one lateral plate and the other side another lateral plate. And this lateral plate mesoderm is the important organ which can forms the limbs of both vertebrates and invertebrates. And then come to the, I think before going to the limb development, and I think you know what are the major organs or major cells differentiated from the embryo to form the limbs. I will repeat once again, those major part is nothing but the lateral mesoderm and the paroxial lateral part of plate of mesoderm and paroxial mesoderm. Okay. So, now we will go to the next part. Before going to the limb development, and we should understand how the bone is developed, because limb is completely nothing but it is completely made up of bones, that is a small bone or big bone, whatever it may be. It is totally completely developed of the bones. So, now before going to the limb development, I think I want you to explain one important aspect, that is how the bone is developed in the embryonic stage. And then later, then these bones are arranged in a proper manner for the proper functioning. So, now here we will discuss how the bone is developing, and always you bear in your mind the bone development is always via endochondrial ossification. It is via endochondrial ossification. Here I will show you how the bone is developing, and now you can see the small cells here. These cells are nothing but it is formed from the mesenchyma. Repeatedly I am telling, this entire bone proper is developed from the somites and mesenchyma in the lateral plate mesoderm, and the cells in the lateral plate mesoderm we can call it as a mesenchyma, and these cells first condenses to form a cartilage, and here you can see the condensing form of this cartilage, and another important thing is very artistically is arranged thing, that is all these condensed forms are completely first to form a skeleton of this bone, that is the bone in which it has to develop. For suppose this is a humerus, maybe it is a pectoral girdle, maybe it is a pelvic girdle, whatever it may be, the first it forms a frame. Okay. That frame is done by the cartilaginous cells, and these cartilaginous cells completely proliferate and it forms a frame of the bone. And then another important thing is, in between the bone it forms these cartilaginous cells from bulges to form a hypertrophic cartilaginous cells, and this is the place where the blood vessel enters into the bone, because each bone should have the blood vessels otherwise it is of no use. So, this is the cartilaginous place where the blood vessels, you can see the blood vessel is entering into the bone. Okay. And another important thing is, I have already told you, this is ossification also should be there. Everybody knows that bone is not completely a cartilaginous part. So, ossification also should be there, and the cells in the middle, I think they form the osteoblast, and this osteoblast will proliferate towards the edges of the bones or the hypophyseal region. This is the hypophysis, proximal hypophysis of any bone, and this is the distal hypophysis of any bone, and this is the shaft of the bone. Any bone we can, if you want to explain, and this is the orientation of any bone, this is the proximal hypophysis, and this is the distal hypophysis, and this is known as the shaft. So, I think now you can see these osteoblast in the proximal hypophysis and distal hypophysis region, and here it forms growth plates. you can see the growth plates, and these growth plates, I think it can be any number of, if the bone is too long, it will form 2 growth plates, and if the bone is shorter bone just like a finger bone, and it will have only 1 growth plate. Okay? And this is how the bone is forming. The bone is forming means, I told you the bone is, this is a humerus bone, this is the radius and ulna bone, and this is the carpals and metacarpals bones. All these bones are first developed like this, and these are developed from the endochondrial ossification. Okay, right? Okay, shall we move to the next part? Okay. And now come to the direct limb development. You know how the bone is developed and everything, and now we should understand how the limb is developed from the embryo at the embryonic stage. Okay. So, the limb development we can, I think I am explaining you in a few under a few heads. One is the formation of the limb bud is the most important thing in the evolution of the limb. Okay. First, the bud has to form from the embryonic mesoderm. Okay. The next one is, I have already told you, if the bud is proper, but if the axis is not proper, the entire formation of the limb is completely go waste. Okay. So, I think the most important thing is limb axis formation. Here I have divided into 4 areas of this limb axis formation. One is limb initiation, and the next one is generating the proximal distal axis of the limb. The next one is anterior and posterior axis of the limb, and the third one is dorsal and ventral axis of the limb. And another important thing is coordinating between the 3 axes. Coordinating between the 3 axes, as I already explained you, that it is nothing but a 3-dimensional coordinating system. If the 3-dimensional coordinating system is not proper, and I think it will lead to the abnormalities of the limbs and abnormalities of the foot also. Okay. The next, another important thing is the most important thing is apoptosis. Apoptosis means the fingers are developed just like a sac, and the fingers should be separated, and I will explain you how the fingers are separated and what are the genes are responsible for this. But finally, here I am telling, and the fingers, once the fingers are separated, the mesenchymal cells between the fingers has to die. They are completely removed from there, and this cell death and the formation of the digits and joints, we call it as apoptosis, and which is the final stage of limb development. Okay. I think you can understand what are the stages of the limb development. One is the limb is formed as a bud. Then after that, extension of the limb takes place. While extending the limb, I think this axis, we should take care of this axis also, and then the 3 axes should coordinate with one another, and then after that, in order to form the limbs, if the fingers are not there, there is no use for the hand also. So, the digits has to separate it. So, I think this apoptosis, that is cell death, occurs in between, and this forms a full development of the limb. I think this is really very interesting topic. Now, shall we go to the next part, that is limb formation. It is not only useful for the zoology people, and I think it is a general topic. Everybody should know how the limb is developing, how the limb is functioning, and I think all these, I think it is a common to everybody. So, now come to the first, we will come to the formation of the limb bud. Limb bud is the first part of the formation of the limb, and you can see the limb buds here, the small limb buds here. This is a chick embryo, okay, does not matter, whatever it may be, and these are the limb buds, and these are the limb buds. I think you can see all these limbs are totally developed. So, now here I will explain you how the limb bud is formed, because that is a scientific proper way of explaining, and how the limb bud is formed from the mesenchyma. And repeatedly I am telling, the major organ which is forming the limbs and whatever it may be, limbs and limb bones and everything, that is the lateral plate of mesoderm. I have already shown you the diagram how the lateral place of mesoderm is separated, and it forms 2 limbs in both the sides. Okay. And this lateral place of mesoderm, and here I will tell you, and we have already seen this germinal layers. This is the ectoderm, and this is the endoderm. In between we can see the mesoderm. This mesoderm is nothing but lateral placed mesoderm I am discussing about. And this lateral plate mesoderm, the first initial stage in the limb bud formation starts from the mesenchymal cells of this mesoderm. And these mesenchymal cells, I think I am pointing it out, and these are proliferation of the mesenchymal cells is the initial step in the limb formation. Okay? And the formation of the mesenchymal cells means the proliferation takes place laterally, both the lateral sides. Are you observing? This is the mesoderm. The initial step is the mesenchymal cell starts proliferating, and the proliferating of the mesenchymal cells in the lateral directions. And another important thing is in the middle region means where the limb is present, where this is one part of the one limb and this is another limb, future limb. Between the interlimb zones and this mesenchymal cells stop the proliferation. Here it is proliferation is nothing but cell division, that is mitosis. Mitosis means it is increasing the cells. So, here actually the lateral sides multiplication is still going on until the apical plate. I will tell you what is the apical plate later. And here we can understand, and in between the two limbs, that is the area of between the two limbs, this proliferation of the lateral mesoderm cells is completely stopped, and from where the limb node is developing. The limb node is nothing but it is a limb bud node is completely, it is start developing. Okay? And here we can see that this won't, nothing won't develop automatically. And always our entire body is completely under the control of genes and proteins, that everybody should accept. Okay? So, I think scientifically I am moving to this, and entire body of anything, whatever it may be in the universe, nothing will develop automatically, but most important things, genes and proteins are very important parts in the development of anything. So, now I think now this is one part of the limb, one limb side and the other one limb side. And you should be able to understand, if you think a little more, you should be able to understand how the position of the limb is identified. I told you how the limb is formed. Okay, mesoderm is proliferating, and in somewhere one place it is interlimb zone, it is completely stopping its proliferation. But from the beginning, if you see from the beginning, how do they know the location? How do the mesoderm knows that it has to stop there? How it is how it can identify the interlimb zone? Because and here we can see that that is genes are responsible for that, and these genes, I think we can see the genes, two types of genes, that is nothing but Hox genes. I have already told you Hox genes. Hox genes I have discussed in the axial region of proximal and distal side. Okay? I think that is familiar already, and these Hox genes, expression of these Hox genes are responsible in the formation, in location of, in identifying the specification of the limb. Okay? Identification of the specific limb, because only that even the cells doesn't know anything. The limb has to start only from here, forelimb. The hind limb has to start from the only in the hip region. That identification of the limb is very important. So, the identification of limb or specification of the limb is the limb specification is controlled by two genes, that is known as the Hox genes, that is Hox gene 5 and Hox gene 6. Okay? And 5 and 6 Hox genes are completely controlling this location, and this is the lateral plate mesoderm, and from these mesenchymal cells are forming the limb bud. Okay? So, here I will explain you the important Hox genes, and I think I have already told you that is forelimb initiation is between the 5 and 6, and this is the cervical part, and this is the thoracic, and this is the lumbar, this is sacral, and this is the caudal. And Hox gene, here you can see the Hox gene 5, Hox gene 6, and this Hox gene 5 and Hox gene 6 is nothing but this is the location of the forelimb, and Hox gene 9 and Hox gene 10, this is the location of the hind limb. You can clearly understand from your body also the first forelimb is starts from the almost in the thoracic region, and hind limb is starts in the hip region. So, I think the specification is not automatically done, but it is completely under the control of the genes. If the genes are proper, if the expression of the genes is proper, automatically the entire body or the entire limb development will be proper. If the genes are not expressed properly, and the deformities will come. Okay. So, I think this is you know what now we have discussed about the Hox genes, and in one way I can tell you these Hox genes are nothing but the group of the cells group of the genes which can useful for the development of the organs in the vertebrates. Okay. And then shall we switch over to the next part? And another important thing is we have already seen that how the specific area should be in what specific area these limbs are to be developed, because this is the Hox genes are directing the specific location. And another point I think it may come to your mind, which is the forelimb and which is the right side limb and which is the left side limb. That also should identify, otherwise limb development cannot grow automatically. The second part we should take care of is which side is the forelimb, which side is the right side forelimb, and which side is the left side forelimb. That also should be specified at this stage only. And here you can see, here also the genes will play a greater role. These genes we can call it as a TBX genes. And these are two types of TBX genes, one is TBX5 and the other one is TBX4. Okay? And this TBX5, I think you can see the blue here, and this TBX5 is completely, it is responsible for the forelimb, and the expression of the TBX4 is responsible for the formation of the hind limbs. Okay. Now, I think you can observe the importance of the genes. Even the right side and left side limb identification, whether it is a forelimb or hind limb, identification is also completely due to the genes only. That is, the genes which are specify the limb type is nothing but two types of genes. Do not forget about this. And these two types of genes are nothing but TBX5 identifying the forelimb bud stage and TBX4 the hind limb bud stage. Okay. I think slowly next we will go for the initiation. So, now you have identified the location, how the genes are responsible for that, and you have identified the right side and left side also. I think next we can go for the how this initiation of the bud takes place. Okay. Slowly I am bringing you to the limb development. So, that is how the limb development initiation takes place. And now I think you can see in this figure, I think in one figure I can show you, and here the first I have already told you this FGF. What is meant by FGF? That is nothing but it is a fibroblastic growth factor, and in the beginning itself I told you about this near the axis formation. Okay. Near the axis formation, when axis is from proximal to distal side, and one protein is responsible, that is nothing but fibroblastic growth factor, and Hox genes are also responsible for that. Now, leave it aside the Hox genes. Now, we are concentrating more on the FGF. Commonly we call it as FGF. I told you repeatedly, FGF is not a gene, it is a protein, and that too it is not under the control of the genes, and mesenchymal cells will secrete this protein. Okay. Mesenchymal cells will secrete this protein, and this protein is it is a group of proteins, and that is FGF4, FGF8, FGF10 or nothing but. So, I think this group of mucopolysaccharide proteins, I think these are completely responsible for the initiation of the genes. The first initiation of the initiation of the limb bud. The first initiation of the limb bud is start from the FGF. Okay, FGF. And in this, I think I have already told you that group of genes. This is 4, 8, 10, and here that is 10. That is FGF10 is responsible for the initiation, And this before the initiation, what exactly is happening? I have already told you, the mesenchymal cells are proliferating towards the ectodermal side. I will show you once again. The mesodermal cell, yeah, here see, the mesodermal cells will proliferating towards the ectodermal region. Okay. So, naturally, this once it reach to the ectodermal region, and it will induce the ectodermal layers also, ectodermal cells also. So, naturally, always the entire limb formation is between the induction of the mesoderm and ectoderm, between the induction of the mesoderm and ectoderm. Now, we will see how this ectoderm also comes into the layer, and FGF10, and this is formed from the mesenchymal cells, and it expresses in the it induces the expression of FGF8. Here you can see this FGF8, and FGF8 is also, it is a protein, but it should be induced by the FGF10. This FGF10 induces the expression of this FGF8 in the overlying of the epidermis. This is ectodermis, this is the ectodermis, this is the mesodermis, this is the endodermis, and this is in the overlying of the ectodermis. And what in turn, why it is inducing? Because FGF8 has a greater role to play here. FGF8 is continuing the limb development. Okay. So, initiation is started by the FGF10, and FGF10 is in turn it is inducing the FGF8, and this FGF8 is the major important protein which is continuing the growth of this limb bud. Okay. And in the presence of Wnt protein also, I have already told you the Wnt protein also. And here one more term you are seeing, that AER. I will tell you this is nothing but apical ectodermal region ridge, and I will tell you about that also. But here you can see this FGF10 and FGF8, they form a loop like structure. Okay. And they form a positive loop for this entire limb development. Limb development is always should go from the FGF10 to FGF8, and then continuous loop is forming here. So, now come to the second part, that is, I told you this is about the AER. What is this AER means? This is nothing but apical ectodermal ridge, and this mesoderm, it is proliferating the mesoderm I have already told you it is proliferating, and it is proliferating only to some extent. So, it can't go beyond that, it is proliferating to some extent, and automatically it will stop its proliferation at the ectoderm stage. Okay. It stops its proliferation at the ectodermal layer, and near the ectodermal layer the mesenchymal cells almost it forms a stratified layer, that is nothing but it thickens to form a ridge like structure, and this thickens to form a ridge like structure means that is nothing but the mesenchymal cells here are completely altering its shape also, and it altering its shapes, that is nothing but it forms the cuboidal to columnar shape. It is attaining the cuboidal shape to columnar shape, and this columnar shaped mesoderm layer near the ectoderm, that is overlying the ectoderm, is completely form a ridge like structure. This ridge is, we can call it as a apical ectoderm ridge. And what is the use of this apical ectodermal ridge? This plays a critical role here, because the entire cell division now we have seen only in the mesenchymal region, but mesenchymal region is stopping here. So, limb has to develop, the further development of the limb has to take place. So, this further development of the limb will take place in this apical ridge region, because this is also nothing but activated mesodermal cells. Okay. So, this apical ectodermal ridge starts its proliferation. Proliferation is nothing but mitosis. If I use that proliferation term, means it is nothing but cell division will take place, automatically the cells are increasing. So, this apical ridge, I think due to the proliferation, and it is increasing the limb bud. Okay. Here I will explain you very briefly, time is very short, and if you remove the AER, AER means apical ectodermal region. If you remove the AER, and completely limb development totally ceases. Okay? So, I think you can understand the importance of AER. Now, come to the next, below the AER, and it can form the progressive zone. Below the AER, it can form the progressive zone, and this progressive zone is nothing but it is part from where these entire bone parts, that is autopod, means stylopod, zygopod and autopod will develop. Okay? So, I think I have already told you this feedback loop is already developed, that is FGF10 is inducing the FGF8, and then in the progressive zone, and proliferation is more when compared to the apical zone, and this FGF8 is in turn it is responsible for the further growth of the limb. And time is very short, and just I am pushing on. And then come to the there is two theories how this progressing is appear. So, one theory is progressing zone is automatically formed by the undifferentiated mesenchymal cells. Automatically it is developing. This is the first side, it is forming the stylopod, and then next zygopod, and then next come to the autopod. But here another theory is it will not automatically grow, and prior allocated cells, even the mesenchyma also prior allocated cells are there, and these determined cells. These determined cells, first it forms the stylopod, and then autopod, and then zygopod. Okay? So, I think these are the theories, and I think we will also believe in this prior expansion theory only, because the proteins in the first beginning itself I told you the proteins are useful for the differentiation of the cell parts. Okay? So, okay then. So, I think now come to the next last part, that is anterior and posterior extension, and this AER is also responsible for the anterior and posterior extension, and then come to the dorsal and ventral extension. I have already told you the dorsal and ventral extension is this, and this dorsal end extension in the embryo is mostly useful for responsible for the limb formation, and here the metagen protein is developed, and this morphogen protein is useful for the morphology of the limb and number of the limbs in the anterior posterior axis. And then come to the last one is nothing but dorsal and ventral. This is also responsible for the dorsal and ventral axis, and this radical fringe and this engrailed, these two are the expressed this dorsal and ventral. And finally, I want to wind up, that is apoptosis. If I do not tell this, the entire thing is go waste, and the limb is formed just like a sac. And these BMPs are responsible for segregating this, and the cell death apoptosis occurs, and if the mesodermal cells dies in between the digits, and I think you can see the digits very clearly. Okay. I think though it is very short time, I think I could able to manage, and I could be able to tell you the entire limb development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the valuable lecture you have given about tetrapod limb development. Thank you to Professor Damayanti Devi, and also thank you to Dr. Padmini.